and welcome to another lawnfawn video. Today we're taking a look at the new Starry Sky Stencil. This is a 6x6 stencil and it's perfect for inking through these openings, adding glitter paste or gel, or doing any kind of technique to create a fun background. For the first card I have today, I'm going to be adding some glitter gel or glitter paste through the stencil. I've cut a piece of rainforest cardstock with a rectangle die, and I'm just going to tape that to the back of my stencil. Then I can flip it over and I'm going to apply the glitter paste through the stencil. So I've got some silver glitter paste here, and I'm just using a palette knife to apply that to the front, make sure it gets into all those openings and everything's nice and even. And once I've got it applied generously, I can scrape off that excess. Then I can pull that stencil away, revealing the starry background that I created. Being careful not to smear any of it as you pull it away. And then I'll just set that aside to dry, and I'll go clean off my stencil and my palette knife so that that glitter does not dry on the stencil. Now to create the card base, I have the Woodgrain Backdrops stamp. I'm going to be using the walnut ink that you see there to make a wood grain card base for my little scene that I'm going to create. So I'm just going to ink up that stamp all the way across. And I'm going to stamp this in two pieces. So I'm going to stamp it on one side of the card base. And then I'll just do the same on the other side. So I'm going to ink it up again. And then this time I'm actually going to turn it so that the little knots in the wood grain are different than the ones on the side that I've already stamped. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of vintage photo distressing to the edges to just kind of darken up that kraft cardstock and make it look more like wood. Now to work on my little scene, I've got a piece of noble fir cardstock that I'm using the stitch hillside to cut the bottom, and then I'm going to put the sentiment "Sending Smiles" that's from the All the Clouds stamp set. I'm going to white emboss that along the bottom so it's nice, bright, and pops off that dark green. So I've used my anti-static tool there. I'm using some clear embossing ink, and then I'm just going to add the white embossing powder to the sentiment. Then I'll just heat that up with my heat tool till it's nice and melted. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of that, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to the bottom of my starry panel that I created. I'm going to make sure it's nice and stuck down since I'm sticking it over that glitter that's kind of got some dimension to it. I'm going to be adding the little car critters to this card. So I've colored my little bears in my car and I've cut them out, and then I'm just adding these little bears to the inside of the car with a little bit of liquid glue. And then I've used these trees from the Happy Trails stamp set, but I only cut them out with a die, so I didn't stamp them. I only used the dies to cut some black trees to create a silhouette of trees behind my car. So I'm just going to add these with a little bit of liquid glue. And I'm just holding my little car in place to kind of get the placement of how high I want them and where I want them. You can see that one's floating in the air, but I'm actually going to cover up the bottom with the car and some more trees, so you're not going to see that. So you can see I'm taking the car on and off to just make sure the placement works, and I'm moving those little trees around as needed. So this just creates a silhouette of trees in the background behind my car since it's a nighttime scene. And then once I have all those in place where I want them, I'm taking that foam tape that I put on the back of the car off, and then I'm just going to stick that car in front of the trees. So you can see that those ones that I kind of left floating, they get covered up by the car and they just look taller. I'm also adding a moon that's cut with just the die from All the Clouds because there's a moon in that set, and that's cut from some yellow shimmer cardstock. And then I'm going to add some foam tape to that whole panel and put it on that wood grain card base that I created. And I just think this is a super cute little nighttime scene with those car critters. Now I'm going to do some ink blending for my second card. So I've cut a puffy cloud backdrop with out of some white paper, and I'm going to add the stencil, and I'm kind of going to make a hinge. So I'm adding it to the front. I'm going to tape it on the back, but I'm only going to tape one side. And that's so I can move the stencil on and off and it be in the same place all the time. So it's hinged like a book. And I'm going to be inking each layer of these clouds in a different color. So you can see I have all my colors there. And I'm going to start in the middle where the yellow is. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want to keep changing colors and brushes. So I'm going to use the same brush pretty much for the whole thing. And to me, if you do that, it's better to start with your lightest color, which is the yellow. So I'm going to start with the yellow, and I'm just inking the bottom of the clouds. So I've taken a piece of just plain typing paper and I've cut it to the width wide enough to just tuck under those clouds. And I'm just inking up the bottom, and then I'm going to close the hinge of my stencil that I've made here, and then I'm going to ink it again through the stencil. So I've got the light inking on the bottom of the clouds, and then I have some darker inking as I'm adding more layers of that color with the stars. Then I can take that piece of typing paper out that I'm using as a mask and move it up to the next slot of clouds, and now I'm going to do the same thing with the orange color. So again, I'm just adding a little bit of color to the bottom of the clouds. I'm going to close that stencil, and then I'm going to add some more ink. I'm going to repeat this process for all these colors. So I'm moving on to the red that's at the top. And then I'll add the red stars. And then I'm going to clean my brush before I move on to the cool colors I have here. So again, the same process here. I'm going to start in the center where that green is because it's a bit lighter than the blue and the purple. And then I can close that hinge and I'm going to ink the green through the stencil. Now for this one, I don't have a piece of paper masking the ones I did above it. So I'm just making sure not to cross over onto that yellow. You could add another piece of typing paper on the top of this cloud if you're worried about cross-contamination between the colors. But it was pretty easy to be careful and not overlap. Now I'm going to move on to the blue here. And again, I'm just paying attention to where my blue is, and I'm just kind of going up into those clouds and making sure not to cross over into the green. And then finally, I'll do the purple at the very bottom. And I just love this kind of rainbow cloud look that I got here. And I love the addition of the star stencil in the same color ink just over top of the other inking. I just think it gives it a really cool tone on tone look because you have darker stars just because you've added extra layers of ink over the top of that other ink blending. So now I'm going to work on the elements of my card, and I've cut the stitched rainbow from some chili pepper cardstock, some fake tan, sunflower, cilantro, and peacock feathers. And I chose peacock feathers for this rainbow because it matches the ink that I chose for my ink blending a little bit better than a blue. So I'm going with the teal in this rainbow. And I've just cut that base out of white. I'm just adding some liquid glue and adding each of the arches to that base. And they line up perfectly. And once I have that rainbow all glued together as one piece, I can add it to my card base very easily. But first I'm going to add this puffy cloud backdrop that I made to the card base, making sure to not glue down the top of the clouds because I want to tuck that rainbow behind one of those clouds. So I'm just adding glue all around the outside and a little bit through the middle, and I'm just going to line that up with the card base and glue that down. So now I can add my rainbow. I'm just adding some adhesive to the back of it. I'm not going to stick it all the way down just yet because I'm going to be adding a little sunshine behind there too. So I'm just tucking it behind those clouds, and I'll just kind of lightly stick it down. And then I'm going to use one of the smiley faces from the Reveal Wheel Circle Sentiment set to stamp on my little sunshine here. And this sunshine is cut with the dies from Spring Showers from Sunflower Cardstock. So I'm just going to add that little face with some black licorice ink, and I'm kind of putting it a little bit more towards the top so when I tuck the sun behind the rainbow, the face doesn't get covered up. Then I can add some glue to the sunshine, and I'm just going to add it to the middle. You could add it to the rays if you wanted to, and then I'm just going to tuck that behind my rainbow. And then now I can make sure that that rainbow is stuck down as well as that sunshine. Now for the sentiment on this card, I'm using the Scripty Smile die cut, and I've cut that out of black cardstock 3 times, and I'm just using my liquid glue to stack those one on top of the other to create a thick die cut. Then I'm going to layer on that Scripty Smile cut from some shimmer black cardstock for the layer on the very top, just for a little bit of shine for this sentiment. I've got a white stitched rectangle frame that I'm going to add to cover up all kind of the messy sides from my inking, so this just frames it off nicely and looks nice and finished. And then I can add that sentiment to my card. And then finally, I'm going to add the little dot on the eye, which I've also stacked, so there's 4 pieces there, so it's the same thickness. And then here is that finished card. I just love those rainbow clouds, and I love the texture that the stars add to the background. Now let's take a look at some cards by the design team. Yainea used some glitter through the stencil to create this dreamy background for her unicorns. Elena added some white ink through that Starry Sky Stencil to create a night scene for smooth sailing. And Grace created this fun shaker card by stenciling clouds and also stenciling glitter with the Starry Sky Stencil. She did the same for this slimline card by stenciling rainbow clouds and using the glitter gel over it for a cool tone-on-tone look. Elise also created a nighttime scene for the card critters. I love that silver glitter gel over that dark cardstock. And Tammy used the stencil to ink blend through and create a tone-on-tone, subtle texture for the background for these unicorns and rainbows. Grace used the stencil for some glitter to create a dreamy sky for her castle. Elena also ink blended over that die cut to create a soft pattern background for her castle. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.